Hi, hello everybody, welcome. I'm Henrietta Holdish, I'm Chief Curator and Director of Curatorial Affairs, and together with my colleague Amanda Hunt, Head of Public Engagement, Learning and Impact, welcome you to the Walker. Before we begin, I'd like to ground us by acknowledging that the Walker Arts Center and the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden are located on the ancestral and contemporary homelands of the Dakota people, and that the site was once expansive marshland and meadow and holds meeting for Ojibwe, Dakota, and indigenous people from other nations that live in the community today. We are thrilled that you're all joining us tonight to celebrate the opening of Pan Daijing, Sudden Places, and it is my great pleasure to acknowledge the generous supporters of this exhibition, Shane Ackroyd and Louis Baskerville. Pan Daijing engages with ephemeral, fleeting experiences of liveness, of absence, of presence, in work that spans sound, music, performance, video, sculpture, architectural intervention, and more. And Sudden Places is the first US solo museum exhibition, which, as you'll see, creates a kind of darkly glittering, pulsating environment, a soundscape, and a choreography in space. I'm really excited that Pan is here tonight to speak with the exhibition curator. After the talk, we invite you to join us in Cargill Lounge, up the stairs, up to the left, for drinks and bites by chefs Sydney Reuter and Axel Pineda of Torsk, and also, of course, to see and experience the exhibition if you haven't had a chance to do so. So with that, please welcome Pan Daijing and Pavel Pyś, curator of the exhibition and curator of visual arts.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Henrietta, for that introduction. Welcome, Pan.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk for about 45, 50 minutes or so, and then we're going to open up for questions. And I'm conscious that many, if not maybe most of the people in the room haven't seen your exhibitions, but they might know you as a musician. So let's start by talking about that journey of how you started and still continue to be a musician, but then actually started making exhibitions in visual art contexts.
Right. First, thanks for having me here, and thanks for the question. If anyone already know my music, I'm really glad to hear that, but probably some don't. I for sure started exploring with sound because I guess that's just something that appears natural to me. And I think as for many people, I didn't have an idea of a profession, a title, a medium. It is the moment when you need to express, when you need to find a place where you feel you belong there. And that felt natural to me. And I never felt I was making music. I was always performing music, be it in the studio, performing on my gear, be it on stage, be it experimenting with environment, so there's all sorts of ideas of what music can be. And that was what has been from the beginning was intriguing to me. And I still continue exploring that question and searching for answers. And, so I felt definitely music for me I felt a sense of loyalty to it because it gave me a lot. It's giving me a lot still. And it's really at heart for me as for many other things I do. But I also felt, that voice that's been always quite clear in my head. It's not about what do I do, what do I make. It's about what I'm questioning. And so I think even the show we're looking at right now, maybe sound is not the most dominant element, but it is a sense of musicality. It is the idea of composing, and that I felt is a language I'm trying to bring to communicate with people I've never encountered in person of the sensibility of a human who's interested in music and sound, how that encounter could be. So I think it's very natural for me that evolved into a broader, more vast and, more complicated possibility in the sense of discipline that's involved in the practice. But I would say for me, this all happened in a very organic way, which I felt very grateful for. Yeah.
And I think this is a good slide to talk about that, because that expansiveness is really central to this project, Tissues, which took place at the Tate. It was an opera, but it was also an exhibition, and then it became a record as well.
Yeah, it didn't really become a record. I think we are, the idea of documentation is very interesting, because when we work with ephemeral ideas, ephemeral material or experience, it is, how do we distill that, something that you can repeat. So I think, of course, record is something that is very natural to, grasp a moment of a part of the experience from that. But, it is, as you said, everything else, it is centered from the idea of music. And I remember like the conversation had already went on with the museum 2 years prior to the exhibition. And I was given like a complete carte blanche, like you can do whatever. I just couldn't let go this thought. I've been already thinking of doing opera since 5 years at that point, and even all the records I was making, all the performance I was doing, all the music tours as I had went on had become a natural research ground for me to hold on to this, idea that I've had since the very, like 4 or 5 years prior to the show. So I felt it's the moment. It just felt the right thing to do. And I also felt it was a interesting moment to kind of maybe brought out the question I had in my head, like, what is music, what is art? I don't know the answer, and it's not about finding the answer maybe, but I want to offer this ground for us to come together to experience something, to think about it, and what does it mean to do performance in the museum space, and what does opera mean? Also, there is the center of music as an idea and not a medium. And I do feel, opera, it is one of the very encompassing form that the idea of composition is at the center of it. And all the other discipline is there to support that vision, the musical vision. The storytelling comes through sound. The musicality is, all the theatrics, all of that can come in all sorts of form, even to an extreme or abstract sense. So I felt there is potential for questioning even deeper. That's how it came together, I guess, yeah.
I love that notion of composition as the kind of organizing principle, and I want to come back to it when we talk about scale figures. But I'm also struck by how you have, I'm not quite sure how to bend the expression, but a foot in one world and another foot in another. And I think it would be maybe a good moment to reflect on what travel has done for you. You grew up in China, but then you've lived in many different places, and you've pulled from those experiences. Could you tell us a little bit about what that journey of being in and out and having those experiences, how that has informed where you are now?
I don't know if this is the right way to compare it. I think if your kid grow up never had taste of sugar, it's probably good, because once they taste it, there's no way back. I've never left China until I was 21. Once I left, I was like, wow. Also, I wasn't like the cool kid who knows VPN, who can jump the wall and like use Google, I've never encountered internet until I was 19. So it was a whole nother world just opened up for me. And like once I'm on the other side, it's not like this side there's no better side. It's just different. But there is, my curiosity just like got triggered, and I guess I just took off. Yeah. It's like I went to many places because I'm just curious. And I feel like everybody I talked to, they had like listened to this record, that's this really rare record when they were 13, and I just found out like for the first time, like sometimes in conversations I felt, while there's so many places in the world, so many films, so many music, so many art, like if I spend every minute to experience that, my whole lifetime is not enough. So I guess that just pushed me to keep going to places. It's exhausting, but I'm here, I guess, now.
Well, let's talk about how Sudden Places came together. And I think you saw the gallery quite recently. You were here in July of last year. That was your
August.
site visit, August.
Something like that, yeah.
We started talking about the show, I think, in January, so it was a quite quick trajectory. But I'd love to hear you reflect on what that experience was like of visiting the space when Walter Price's exhibition was on view, and then how that visit then started seeding the core ideas for this exhibition. And we can also lean a little bit on a couple of images from this show, which was on view recently, because it led in many ways to this show here.
Yeah. I mean, the ideal world, I would love to fall in love with every piece of architecture I'm given the chance to touch. But like you can fall in love every time you meet someone. So that's sadly the case. Not saying this is not beautiful, but it's a different kind of encounter, and sometimes also takes time. And I felt, for example, we're talking about the Tate show. A big part of it for me was how the musicality or the sense of choreographing the space come through the architecture. So a big part of it is to create this like large scale light installation to make the oil tank disappear, and the wall is breathing, is pausing with the movement of the performer, and the opera becomes like a landscape that's like the clouds that's covering what is moving underneath. So in that sense, I felt I understand the nature of every encounter is different, so I came with no expectation. And we talk about also, you were asking me earlier, like the kind of difference of scale of space, how it is for me. This is definitely a challenging.
This is one of Pan's smallest exhibitions to date, because the last show was like the size of the entire Barnes building. So it's a shift in scale, but that's important to acknowledge. It's a challenge. It's not just given that you can immediately bend to that.
For sure. And I was just telling you earlier also, like, I think it's not about big or small. There's no bias towards that. It's this sometimes the sense of flowing, breathing, the contrast in a very big space. You put something very small, and how do you bring this narrative, the dramaturgy of the movement? How do you kind of orchestrate that from people that you cannot predict how they would, the habit of viewing, right? So I think all of this uncertainty sometimes needs a lot of space to host. And then in that sense, here, the space is hosting different possibilities. So it took time for me to tap into that potential of the room, but also, I guess, we are dealing with there are architectural interventions, and I think it is impossible for me not to think of a room as an environment. Like, it's never separation of the work and the space, but also not everything have to become a transformation entirely. So there is definitely a negotiation between myself, my own history, in my interest, and what the room can offer. It's a very interesting experience, and I think we're looking at like the work that is in a way a similar scale of space, which work more with the kind of complete transformation of an environment that you forgot what it was originally is, right? So here we're working with something differently, and I think sometimes I took all of this bit challenge, bit advantage, disadvantage as a kind of a destiny of the exhibition. And I kind of like that. It's like it gives me space to improvise.
I think it's also important that the space, you're one of the artists for whom the activity and what happens in the studio extends right into the exhibition space and up until the installation. Very responsive, iterative. And I think, for you, your performances and exhibitions, they're never just about showing a work, but they're also a space for making work. And that's especially the case with the hour between Dog and Wolf. So could you tell us a little bit about how that was visioned, but actually made using exhibitions and performances along the way?
This is also speaking of one of those artists who can't afford a studio. No, just kidding. It is a privilege for sure to be able to negotiate trust from institution to give you access to a scale of an environment and architecture that is able to let the idea continue to brew. And for me, I do very much value, there is also, the concept is not just about the presentation of the work, it's also the kind of slowing of time, right? If we look at everything is, for me, is in that sense durational. Even comes down to, if we compare the kind of scale of outcome, even the idea of a record, it's not just about that piece of music you hear. It is there is a lot of compromise or give and take. In that sense, do I want to make it sound good, or do I actually want to just be naive here, because that might deliver more message? And that's, I think, the same for me when it comes to the showing of works, the exhibition space. It's very obvious to me that I don't think any building is still. I think they are living. I am just, reveal in a way what I see through, as I said, I don't feel like I make music. I reveal what I hear. I'm a filter of that. So I think in that sense, how I approach this kind of process is very process focused. And the grounds that an exhibition offered to me is a very precious opportunity for, especially when we're talking about work that's so site responsive and site specific, that I feel I've layered out all of this elements and fragments. And then the duration of the exhibition is a place where things start to marinate, I think exhibition is a natural breed ground for something to happen. And I want to be able to, see that thing grow, be it 8 weeks, be it half a year or 8 months, and I felt, for example, the work you're talking about in Hong Kong, it was a pretty crazy moment, because I had 2 shows in a row in the same museum. At the beginning was a work in the group show, and then I had a solo show right after, like with the multiple floor. So I was able to spend quite a lot of time, also because of pandemic, you go in quarantine for 3 weeks in the hotel, and then I spent like almost half a year in Hong Kong, and like able to look at the space, think of ideas. So it was an opportunity for me to be the resource both be production and time and the trust, all of these possibilities. Also that I wasn't touring anymore as a musician, so I had more time to be focused on one idea. That I could, all of these ideas come together, the installation, the music composition, also like the idea of like being a director of film, right? Like kind of how do I approach my own audition, rehearsal, performance, things that I shoot as almost found footage, and then work with that together with scripted, directed, and like off-site scenes together, create a larger narrative. And that's something I've been exploring over different exhibitions. And this was just the time I was able to really put things together. So the hour between Dog and Wolf original was an hour-and-a-half feature length, and I decided to hard cut it into 23 minutes. It's very painful, but it feels like the right thing to do. For me, it felt that was kind of a moment where, it's not about looking back. It's really about what is medium really mean anymore. And where does artists make work? It's not just the exhibition space, but it's also every moment when I am engaging with material. In my case, material is space. Material is also human. Material is also words, conversation. So if I am unbiased towards any possibilities, and I feel like this just a very natural process and progress that it come into a film. And I think film for me, it was a medium that feels the right way to distill it.
I want to come back to what you said, which was so interesting. You said, I don't make music, I reveal sound. And so how do you know when something needs to be revealed?
It's not about when, right? I said I reveal what I hear.
Yeah.
Because I guess, you know, when you do stuff, you listen to it, it's real time and it feels right. And that's, you know, this is, I guess, in everything, it feels like that. I didn't go in with a plan. I hope I would never. And I think this is the only way. There's no other way. And like, I don't question when and why. I don't feel like I need to know. It's just a matter of, you know, be able to find a way to stay sensitive, stay true, to stay honest to what you want to say, and then having that in mind and just let yourself go. And also let things come to you in with full openness. And I feel this is a quite free fall feeling, and that's the beauty of being a musician.
Yeah. There was one impulse which was so strong once you did the site visit, which was, you said, we have to show the paintings. So as you go into the space, there are these two incredible paintings. And they are the result of a series of actions that unfolded in your exhibition in Munich last year. So let's talk a little bit about these and how they relate back to the exhibition Mute that took place at Haus der Kunst.
So these works it's like the method of making it has been something I guess I've been doing since maybe 6-7 years in different work. It had come out, you know, as like I do work a lot with the sense of time, the duration. So I do think, you know, we were talking about how exhibition become a ground of continue exploring, continue making the work. So there is, my approach to choreography is very similar to my relationship to my own performance, in the sense of I don't want to be the authority. I would felt I want, if I am a captain of the ship, all the performers of the sailor, or, you know, I'm the conductor of the orchestra, but it is also a way to make them feel the, you know, for me, the strength and that they could offer in the piece is more important than the delivery or the execution of the, you know, in a precise way. So
they have agency in the process.
Yes,
yeah.
And how do I give that, and how do I, you know, in a way curate that to happen? And also it is a very discipline based way of choreography, because you know, it's a lot of also like works really a lot with your psyche, the moment of you can't allow yourself to be vulnerable. So, and it takes a lot of time for me to observe, and which I think for me is the one of the most exciting thing is my curiosity of people. So I really observe and interact and create situations that I'm able to understand how each performer can react to my choreography and find something that would bring that vulnerability out of them. So in this way, everything feels between intention and unintentional. And the drawings are, you know, they are moments which was very, I would say, almost secretive, because he draws on this idea of automatic writing, that it is also a myth in Chinese ghost stories, how we channel with the spirits. So I kind of like think there is a humor in that. I want to like bring that in. So there is moments that maybe, you know, for example, the methods we're working with this painting, you will see upstairs. The first, I would say, the scale of painting that was produced was in the Hong Kong exhibition, where there was 6 hours every day durational performance, went on for I think 7 weeks or so, and then every day probably 5 to 10 minutes maximum. There is moments when each performer are able to tap into a space in their mind. They are moving naturally without looking at the wall, creating a kind of moment of writing, marking their names with a sense of grieving. And this accumulated over time with uncertainty of how they will be overlaying. But at the same time, it is also, for me, I play with a certainty, but it's also, there is a certainty in where what is going to become. And we took the wall of the museum off and turned into a sculpture. So in this sense, this is kind of reversed.
We're not doing that this time. We're not taking the wall
Next
off.
one.
Next one, okay.
You know, and I think this one was kind of quite the opposite. I wanted this to happen again, and knowing, so it's more pre-conditioned. We build sculpture that has also function in the space, interacting with
so
audience.
they're here in the bottom left.
Yeah, and then the sculpture are wrapped with canvas, painted in black acrylic, and the performers were, you know, they had basically smashed chalks near pans, and then occasionally they would, you know, if they have a distance within the wall or there is a moment that their arm swings next to it, they could basically document that movement. And through this, the act, through having the chalk as a medium to making marks. So in a way, they don't really know what they're doing. And I do value the beauty of that. It's like when, you know, someone is more beautiful when they don't know they're beautiful. And I do feel these moments of accumulation of, it is action in a way, but it's an action that feels just kind of feels when you're doing things with, it's an inertia. And I felt this is kind of, I hope, becomes a habit. And this painting is not something about the composition and the image. It is a visual encounter, but I would hope it is kind of more of a tracing device. Mm-hmm. You know, and I like to talk also like for me, rooms are listening device, space a listening device. So I think this canvas for me is a device of tracing movements over time without intention. Yeah.
They are certainly not shown in a traditional way that a painting would be. And I think we should talk about that. So here we have the two works within receded niches, lit in an incredible way that our head preparator Jonathan organized and created. And then shall we share the intent? Can we talk about the intention around?
No.
No? Okay.
No, do whatever you want. Say whatever you want.
Well, here we go. But I think it's important to talk about it because they're so unusual. I mean, earlier when we were in the space, I said, God, they look so weird. And Pan was really happy. You said, finally someone said what I wanted to hear about these paintings. But I think I was struck by one moment in our dialogue around this decision where you had said, I just imagine if someone had just ripped the wall open and found the painting to be inside. So...
Yeah, I mean, I want that to happen, but sometimes it's like you can't want something too much because it's definitely not going to happen, right? So I was trying to recenter myself in the process of not trying too hard. But, you know, like, it is up for interpretation. Every gesture, every intervention. For me, I'm not interested in informing or showing, personally. If there is a moment of disorienting, confusion, you know, question, you know, you even interested enough to interpret why or how or what does it mean, I'm happy already. And I felt for me here, my intention, if there is any, would probably, yes, I want to feel like the sense of revealing. You know, we're peering things off. There is like tearing things apart, it is a violent action. But there is also, it is a violent that is, it is tension or it is something that's more internal. So I want to play with that. So I felt are they stuck there? Did someone rip it off? What was the focus of the action? And like, these are all things I'm just raising these questions, and hopefully we can, whoever encounter it can tap into any of the area and like trigger some thoughts. And I think that, I mean, personally, when I watch a film, that's what I'm looking for. So I hope people, when they see my work, they would go into those places.
Yeah. Let's talk about Scale Figures, which is a work that you see but also don't see in the exhibition. This is a teaser of it from Munich as you come towards it. Here it is at the Walker. Scale Figures consists of a sound element. It consists of these suspended brass elements, but it also has an unseen component, which we'll show an image of, but we won't say where it is. But I love the way that you've described it, and it comes back to the notion of composition. So you describe this piece as a composition in 3 parts.
Yeah, it is. Bye. It is for me. I mean, I don't know. I feel everything's a piece of music. It's also a piece of choreography work. Like look at each strands the way, you know, it's definitely very time consuming to put them the way it is. It's I don't know. I like to sit with these moments. For me, this is a dance work.
Yeah, I was struck by that because you're also talking about it as being, for you, the suspended elements became a stand-in for dancers. I remember in a previous conversation, but that you were also very interested in how they force you to move and they choreograph you around the space. They're suspended high. You're looking up at them. You're trying to get a sense of the volume by moving around them. So there's certainly that is inherent.
Yeah, I think there is a sense of I like to bring this awareness of ourselves into something that is not contained by our physical scale. So I like to play with the scale, the height, the room, and also by observing, moving around. And there is also the dual, the composition of for two opera voice, a countertenor and a mezzo soprano, how their voice intertwined. But it's also not about listening. It's about they come out at times, right? So when you enter or when you encounter this work, your senses are triggered in multi layers. So it's not like I'm looking at something, and I feel like that for me is kind of how I wouldn't say they would. I think any dancers would disagree that this can stand in for them, but it is, I compose the room, I compose the piece in that sense of, is there storytelling? Is there a musicality? Do we hear sound by looking at them? And I feel very often, I know since I was a kid, when I hear something, I see something. When I see something, I hear something. This is always at the same time happens. And that's just, this is what I would like to, I guess, in the sense of like how our senses work. That is for me the natural grounds of playing with. So this is kind of a playground of playing with these possibilities of material, of dimension, so many things. And like these ideas are no different than choosing a texture, choosing an instrument, choosing a voice, writing also the decision of being monotone. So it is a composition because it's highly musical in my sense. That's how I consider that. And the dramaturgy or the storytelling around it has chapters because the original work was shown at Gwangju Biennale in South Korea. And actually I worked with travel of 5 minutes. So it's the first work encounter when you go to the Biennale, because it's occupying the whole bridge.
Which is here, these images.
And then the second part of it, actually you have to walk, and most people missed it, including you, which I love.
Sorry.
That. It's only for the special ones. Oops. I was gonna say, you have to walk through the little paths with the trees. After 2 minutes, you open up on top of an amphitheater.
I'll take your word for it, yeah.
Gonna go back there. I'll send you photos. On top of the amphitheater, there is a pavilion, a traditional pavilion, which have 8 sides, and we worked with kind of sculpture clamping onto the sound. So there is actually the main body. The work at the Biennale is only the prologue for the reveal, but the reveal is so far away that most people missed it.
I missed the reveal too. Yeah.
But I love that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you missed it.
But I think that segues into the question about scale figures, which is that it also has an unseen element. And a lot of your work is playing with that and revealing, concealing, hiding, showing. And so we're kind of breaking the rule here a little bit because we're showing it installed, but we're not saying where it is. But what does that, what does it mean to present a work that you don't fully see? Or that we tell people that it's there. We say this is on the Walker campus. What does that do?
I think it's, people will see it if they are really interested and really care. I am saying this not because I'm biased to anyone, or there is a way of, I'm not trying to hide any work, and I just think things takes layers, and it also takes time. And I felt this is a playing with, First of all, I like to sample this idea of sampling. I don't use sample at all in music, but I like to work with the idea of sampling my own material in my different works. So I think this is a sampling of, the idea of like how I also like the pipe is kind of the vein of the architecture, as I talked about before. I don't consider building as a steel piece of something. So I consider it has like a liveness in the architecture itself, and I think pipe are the flow through it. So I like to kind of harness this moment, grab its vein in some sorts, and I also felt, the idea of this, the myth or the mystery, or there is something. And I think that's also what brought me from the very beginning into what I do, is because there is something I feel I don't quite get it yet. I haven't seen anything. I want to re-enter, re-encounter, revisit, learn and unlearn. So it is an attempt that I am exercising in showing my work, in making exhibition, to see what are the possibilities of the way of showing can maybe bring different habits of encountering, of seeing, of understanding. And it's going to be maybe a lifetime experiment, who knows?
So before we open up to questions, my last question that I want to talk about, the last issue, is this experience of working with you, and we had this kind of impasse at one point, and it wasn't quite right, our plans weren't quite right, and there was this moment where you said this exhibition is too tidy. And you said that, in your process, you typically expose the building's skeleton. And that set off a path for us. And we went on a journey and we looked for the skeleton. And this image shows part of that. It's again about revealing, but there is an element in this show that I encourage you to carefully study and find, that is this moment of revealing, of drawing your attention to the innards, the skeleton. What is that? Let's talk about what that accomplishes for you in your spaces.
I feel like every time, if I probably have a different answer, but my answer for right now is probably, I wonder also by, during the install, I definitely had a lot of reflection of like, I think like the idea of revealing for me has a metaphorical existence in my upbringing, because the kind of environment I grew up, the truth is never present your face. So I do felt it is, I enjoy the peeling of layers. I enjoy, maybe some see it, some don't. And I think the man-made, the synthetic and the organic, the machine and the human, the man-made and all of this combination, a duet, it happens around us. And I think it is a gesture that maybe open up a gate for something. It is not about what we are revealing. It's the gesture of opening up something that's unseen, brings maybe a sense of hope, for me at least. Yeah.
Beautiful. We're going to open up to some questions, but before we do, I just want to offer some thanks. I want to really thank you for this incredible exhibition. I really want to thank Thaisa, who has worked with you for quite some time now. And I also would really like to thank my colleagues. I wasn't here during the installation period, and the torch was carried by colleagues here at the Walker Henrietta, but I especially would really like to thank Brandon Eng, who is our curatorial assistant extraordinaire, who is here somewhere. I think he's being shy. There he is. So thank you so much for being here, being such an incredible advocate for the show and working so closely with Pan. We could not have done it without you.
Thank you.
So there are two mics on either side. If you put your hand up, you'll have a mic and we'll take a couple of questions. There's one in the back there.
How would you describe the hope, I guess, that you mentioned when you talk about peeling away layers?
I mean, how would I describe to explain what hope means to me? I feel pretty hopeless right now because I don't know the answer. I mean, it's when you have I mean, how can you crave something you've never experienced or had, right? But that's possible. That's kind of something I feel like I'm not hope for something. It's not I want something. If you never taste water, you can't be possibly wanted to drink water, but it kind of feels the idea of water is really good. So I felt that kind of hope is a projection on my crave of maybe certain, this is a very personal place, I would say. And if I may get personal, then would be maybe like the kind of sense of closeness with people or intimacy or certain, all the sort of things that comes to a very deep place that maybe one lack growing up, and then you are searching in places that feels hopeless, like behind a wall of a museum. But yeah.
There's a question up there on the right.
I'm curious if nightlife is in your life at all. I mean, generally, like techno aesthetics, our culture, or like, yeah, I'm curious if that exists for you.
Can you see the dark circle on my eyes?
Right. Yeah, I clocked the fit too, so.
I mean, of course, like it's so funny because I live in Berlin, everybody talks about Berghain. It's a place I performed like many times. Every time was very different. And, I do not go out. Not because I don't want to. I'm just not equipped anymore for the conditions. Sadly, I'm getting there. Hopefully one day again. But I do have a lot of respect for the nightlife community and generally club culture, techno music, and all this stuff that maybe is very overly talked these days. But I do think we all know, I mean, hopefully, how it feels when one lose themselves dancing. And I think that sort of getting the sense of trance, it is a very hopeful experience. And I also like just be with strangers and feeling protected by loud music is an amazing feeling, and I would not trade that for anything else. But do I want to access that all the time? Personally, not. Some do like to access it more often, but I do think this is, this for me was at the very beginning. I've never been to a club in China, so I didn't know how it felt. But as I moved abroad and, understanding also the look of people, desperate, hungry, fucked up eyes and stares, or the way they dress and the style of a place. And, also this kind of layers of how when you go out, is it in the basement, is it in the garage, is it behind the fridge, this is door? I mean, just saying, there's all possibilities, right? Is it the basement of a restaurant, like shopping mall? That's beautiful. And I think that is also, I don't know, making a exciting party is not less challenging than making a good exhibition.
Right.
In some sense. Yeah.
There's
That's
a question.
awesome. Thank you.
There's a question right there in the middle.
Thank you. So obviously the scale of your works are quite immense, right? I mean, these are very, very large spaces that you work with, and quite a bit goes into developing them. But the focus of your work is on how people feel about them, right? And giving them an experience. So how do you balance the scale and sort of the effort it takes to create these spaces with trying to allow as many people as possible to experience them? how does that figure into your design and timelines for these works?
Thanks for the question. It is not easy, and when we're talking about the focus as an experience, is not about the concern of others. It is simply the interaction of the two scale of two way of playing, right? Like a person encounters space, how other people move in the space make you see the space differently. And that is a question of allowing others. I try to create an environment that I wouldn't say allow people to experience. I would say allow layers of experience. That's what I can do. But do people show up or not? I think it's difficult. Which is why I think maybe outside of Europe people know more of my music, because music are available online. You can just listen to it. As working with ephemeral, experience-based, or you have to really see to understand the details I'm playing in museum space, is even the question comes down to how many people are privileged enough to have access to that. I never had the chance to see that growing up until I moved abroad. So these are the questions I'm still thinking. So thanks for asking that. Do I have an answer yet? I don't. I think it's a question together with institutions and curators and other artists that we can maybe keep pushing boundaries and trying out possibilities to see how we can allow more ways of making. Yeah.
I think we have time for one last question. I think that hand in the back went up first. Yes, you. You. Yes, you. Is it Minna? Hi, Minna. Your hand shot up the fastest.
A worthy question. I don't know if it's not as worthy as the others.
It's the last question, Minna, has to be profound.
Okay. Oh, now okay. It's not. I don't know if it's profound, but I was interested in knowing about or hearing more about the choice of the flooring in sudden places, like what your thought process was behind it, and the way that it was installed. Because it could have been installed like completely flat, like flush to the ground, but it's sort of like wrinkled. And so I'm interested to hear about that, because it does also span like the entire space.
Thank you. First is tar paper, and I've always wanted to work with tar and like generally oil in my work, and of course it's inflatable, so it's never allowed. I don't know how we were allowed here, but I guess it happened. I mean, a lot of things happen. Like, I'm really grateful for that. I know it's unusual. It's sometimes difficult to work with regulations for everybody. So I appreciate that. The kind of texture, sometimes it's also, I don't want to take credits for things that I shouldn't be taking. If I have not laid down tar paper on the ground before, I'm not going to say that bubble, that bump there is exactly how I imagined. No. So shout out to the tar papers. They really come through. And I'm glad also, for me, as I was, that's why it's so important for me to be on site every day to see the install. Because the adjustment, the look, and the thinking process happens as this is going on. How that in relation to the moving image. And, I think in natural it's part of the environment. It's not a symbolic gesture or it's trying to be something it's not. It's more like when we look at the image, the film, for example, with the floor in front of it, and without that, what difference does it make to my encounter to this moment of watching? So these things are not prescribed or preconditioned in that sense, and things reveals to me as it goes. And the choice of material comes from maybe a history of interest, but the outcome of it is the beauty of also the uncertainty of working with material that's unusual, and it comes out in a way that brings into the narrative also the decision of like layering it all. Do we lay half of the room first and see how it looks and then continue to do it or not? This is part of the process. Yeah.
There were a couple of hands that went up, but we are about to head into a reception. Pan will be there, so please feel free to ask questions, find Pan. And my
just have a
colleague,
drink.
or have a drink, and my colleague Megan is going to share a little bit about the experience that we're about to have.
Hi, thank you, Pan. Thank you, Pavel. Thank you, Nikki, who's been here interpreting for us. And thank you all who've gathered to celebrate this work and this exhibition. As Pavel said, my name is Megan Leafblad. I am the Associate Director of Public Engagement here at the Walker. So yes, we want to continue the conversation, but we want to do so in a little more convivial manner. So we want to invite you to join us in the Cargill Lounge for a reception. Right off of the Cargill Lounge is the exhibition Set in Places, so you'll be able to also check out the show. And then a few little housekeeping bits before we hear from some of the key folks who are involved in getting us into that convivial mood together. So the Cargill Lounge, if you haven't been, you're going to head up out of the theater and take a left. You're going to go past our gift shop. And there's a stairs or there is a small elevator, and you want to head up. And that is where you'll find yourself in the Cargill Lounge. Another key piece of information is this yellow ticket. You should have received one when you entered. If you didn't, you can find one of our wonderful visitor experience staff. But we would like to host your first beverage. There is a bar serving a multitude of drinks. And then we also are extremely lucky to have some small bites provided by Chef Sydney and Axel. We'll hear from them in just a moment. But if you haven't experienced Torsk's food before and their hospitality, you are in for a tasty treat. So Torsk is chef duo Sydney Reuter and Axel Pineda, and they first connected while cooking together at Fika, the cafe at the American Swedish Institute. There, they cultivated a passion for Scandinavian culture and cuisine. 3 years spent together in the kitchen, on the hotline, in the prep area, and they started their own independent culinary pop-up journey. So you may have seen them popping up around the Twin Cities, but most recently, they have been in residence at Bar Brava, which is a natural wine bar just down the way in North Minneapolis, where they are serving fresh bites from an open scratch kitchen, which is really lovely. You can see them as they work and they prepare the food. If you have not been, I would encourage you to go over and have that experience. Their evolving menu reflects why what they personally love to eat. This could be a hot dog, it could be scallop crudo. The range of what they can do is impressive. That's all usually rooted in Scandinavian traditions, but still approachable, inventive, and really quite delicious. So I'm going to stop talking. Drink ticket, chefs, more conversation, exhibitions, and I'm going to let them tell you a little bit more about what's in store.
All right, so we did a lot of classic Scandinavian food just coming from Fika. First thing we've done is a gravlax, but it's a little different. So it's sort of a poke-style gravlax with a little micro salad, gochujang aioli. And then we have a smoked trout dip that we do sell at Bar Brava, one of our top hits, seed cracker made by Sydney. And then the last one is just very winter beet salad, beet, apple, and then a nice orange vanilla reduction. Come try, it's delicious.